difference in the community.
It's helping people, protecting the ones that need to be protected.
I've been a community advocate for all my life.
I've worked for Bush and Obama and Trump and Biden now.
Overcoming obstacles.
2 rooms, no electricity, no water, dirt floor. I became a cop at 19.
You get criticized for not speaking Spanish well enough. You get criticized for speaking Spanish too much. You're getting it from all sides.
Changing perception.
Many lowrider owners are depicted as thugs, gangbangers, and that's just not the way it is. I feel like it's our responsibility to make sure there's a level playing field.
And together, in unity, we can make a better community.
You're watching an Arizona's Family Special, celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Olivia Fierro, along with Kim Quintero and Javier Soto. Hispanic Heritage Month is started out as a week back in 1968 under President Lyndon Johnson.
20 years later, President Ronald Reagan turned that week into a month. It's celebrated from September 15th to October 15th every year.
And we are dedicating the next half hour to highlighting truly amazing people who are helping Arizona's Latino and Hispanic communities thrive. So here in Arizona, one of the biggest historic contributions of Hispanic heritage on our society is in agriculture. Arizona, as you know, has deep roots in the fields and groves that feed our nation. And if you head to one of our border communities and you wake up early enough, you will see thousands of farm workers make the daily trek across the border. It's common for them to wake up at midnight, wait in line for 2 to 3 hours at the port of entry, then cross into the United States and work a full day in the fields. And farmers tell us they could not feed the country without this irreplaceable workforce.
We want hardworking people to come to this country that know agriculture and are willing to work in agriculture. And we've always celebrated that in the past. That's the American way and the American dream.
It's hard work, but these men and women told us they can make as much as $250 per day. In this video, they're harvesting lettuce in Yuma County.
Those farm workers play a critical role in keeping food on our supermarket shelves. But did you know that more than 80% of all farm workers in the U.S. are Hispanic? One Arizona man in particular credits his tireless work in the fields for helping shape his successful career in law enforcement.
He was on service 2938. Be advised, I'll have a CO on board.
It's a hot afternoon near Yuma.
Service 2938, 10-4.
But for retired DPS trooper Martin Marquez, the temperatures don't slow him down one bit.
I love it. This is, since I was 13 years old, I wanted to be a highway patrolman.
Now, at age 63, Marquez has worked a career in Arizona law enforcement for more than 4 decades. Currently, he serves as a roadside motorist assistant out of District 4, headquartered in Yuma, covering some 400 miles of roads and responding to drivers in distress.
When you pull up on somebody and they need help, what's their reaction?
Oh, right away. Oh, they have been called their angel many a times. There have been times when they'll say, I was praying, and here 5 minutes later you show up.
In the same area that Marquez patrols, the wide open farmlands hold special meaning to him.
We have contributed to, to Arizona, the fields.
Marquez was born into a Mexican-American migrant farm worker family.
I was 5 years old when we moved to this area. I lived in San Luis, Sonora. We lived in an adobe house. No electricity, no water. For windows, we had plywood. We lived there almost 3.5 years.
As a child, the heat was something he grew accustomed to.
There was not a shade, there was no trees, nothing. It was like bare land. And we had an outhouse out in the back. We used to, in fact, we used to fight for that outhouse with the tarantulas, the sidewinders, the scorpions. Because that was the only shade pretty much in the whole.
Harsh conditions for most, but for Marquez, those elements prepared him for the years ahead. At the age of 5, Marquez picked cotton with his siblings. By age 10, he worked the lettuce fields of Yuma Valley with his dad.
So you were bent, 19 hours all day long. And I still remember the technique. This way. You were, thinning lettuce.
At age 14, he began working full-time every summer in Salinas, where he met Mexican-American labor leader and civil rights activist Cesar Chavez. He witnessed firsthand the movement aimed at stopping the injustice against farm workers like himself. Today, Marquez portrays the epitome of the American dream.
My parents taught me to work hard. I mean, my dad worked the field all his life till he retired, and thanks to God, I still have him alive.
From his service in the fields to his continuing legacy in law enforcement, he's taught his own children it doesn't matter where you start from. As long as you work hard and stay positive, life will be fruitful.
Marquez is still working with DPS full-time and is not quite sure yet when he'll retire.
In 2017, the band U2 performed to a sold-out crowd at Cardinal Stadium. That night, a poem written by an Arizona native and poet laureate, Alberto Rios, was projected onto those enormous screens. The use of the poem, The Border, a double sonnet, was a surprise to Rios, who later found out about it from a friend who attended the concert. So when your work gets the attention of a world-famous band like U2, you're clearly doing something right. For Arizonan Alberto Rios, his work has been shared and celebrated in so many spaces. His success as a writer, an incredible journey for any artist, but in particular a point of pride for Latinos, whose stories are so infrequently told.
This poem is called Don't Go Into the Library. The library is dangerous. Don't go in. If you do, you know what will happen. It's like a pet store or a bakery. Every single time, you'll come out of there holding something in your arms.
Arizona's inaugural poet laureate, Alberto Rios, makes words sound like music. He gives voice to the thoughts most can't articulate, bilingual or not, and gives life on the border, breath on the page.
The truth of it is, I think I invented poetry for myself at least.
As an ASU Regents professor, Rios teaches creative writing, but personally his call to poetry came early. As a border town boy in Nogales, his father from Chiapas, his mother from England, he lived a duality many Latinos know well. A life in English and Spanish.
The first thing we were told when we got into the first grade classroom was, you can't speak Spanish in here. And so somebody raised their hand and said, Seguro que sí, of course we can speak Spanish. Just listen. And the teacher says, not what I mean. You're not to speak Spanish, and if you do, we're going to swat you. Well, swat was a very big word in first and second grade.
But the storyteller's voice would not be silenced, although not always shared.
For me, this is how it all started, as something more or less secret, something for me, and something that I didn't have to explain to anybody.
Secret scribbles gave way to a celebrated career of published poems and prose. Most recently, the novel A Good Map of All Things, inspired by generations of his own family. Alberto Rios, the daydreaming student turned teacher, always with more stories to tell, reaching beyond any borders with his words.
I'm glad for my parents who are no longer with me. I'm glad for my family. I'm glad that I can make a difference. I just trust that when the time comes to measure what I've done, it'll be there. And that lets it remain magical.
Rios continues to write poetry and publish fiction and serves as director of the Virginia G. Piper Center for Creative Writing at ASU.
You're watching an Arizona's Family Special, celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month.
A United States Marshal is an appointed position that typically lasts 4 to 8 years, depending on the length of the presidency. However, the Marshal for the District of Arizona, David Gonzalez, has held his position for more than 2 decades. And one look at this picture of him as a child in his Marshal shirt, and you realize there's a reason for his longevity. He was made for the job.
David Gonzalez, U.S. Marshal for the District of Arizona, is the longest-serving Marshal in the country.
I was initially appointed by George W. Bush in 2001, and And I assumed I'd be here for 4 or 8 years, because that's kind of the standard procedure with presidential appointees. When there's a change of administrations, then you leave and they bring in a new person. But I was reappointed when President Obama came in, and did 8 years under President Obama. Then Trump was elected. I did 4 years with President Trump.
And President Joe Biden reappointed the Arizona native. But interestingly, it's his tragic childhood that was the base for the young Latino becoming a leader.
When I was 10 years old, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And there was seven kids in my family. And about 8-9 months later, she died. And me and my 7 siblings were distributed to all the aunts and uncles and grandparents in Flagstaff.
His grandparents, Ramon and Virginia Otero, raised David, instilling the importance of education and hard work.
Get me up at 5 in the morning to go clean the store, mop the floors, wax the floors, clean the bottles, stock. And I remember grumbling and maybe cussing under my breath. I was like, man, I gotta go to school or this or that. But he was teaching me a lesson that you don't get anything for free. You got to work for it, and that stayed with me.
In college, Gonzalez was hired by the Coconino County Sheriff's Department, becoming the youngest police officer in the country.
I had long hair, and I was going to NAU, taking police science classes, and he hired me as a deputy sheriff when I was 19 years old. It's unheard of. And I couldn't buy a gun, I couldn't buy bullets, but I was a patrol deputy in Coconino County.
Gonzalez was then hired by DPS, getting to wear the Smokey the Bear hat he had always dreamed of. But a true believer in hard work and having a great attitude, Gonzalez worked his way up, promoting to sergeant, where he worked undercover narcotics, to lieutenant, to captain, then to commander, where he helped start the gang task force, also known as Get 'em. However, it was his presidential appointment that really caught him by surprise.
I remember sitting in the Oval Office looking outside. The president was talking. I'm looking outside thinking, I'm never going to be in here again. I'm going to take this all in, And I have a napkin. I borrowed from the White House because I wanted a memento, and I put it in a little frame over there because I was thinking, my God, I can't believe I'm in the Oval Office with the President of the United States. Poor little David from the block, from Flagstaff, in the Oval Office. I couldn't believe it.
Not one to waste an opportunity, Marshal Gonzalez has remained focused and bipartisan.
When I took this job, I got some great advice from some of the federal judges, and said, just do your job, and even though it's a political appointee job, just do your job.
And always remembers the dichos, or life lessons his grandparents taught him, he's now passing on.
I'm sure a lot of Latino kids looking up and saying, he made it, I can make it.
Any young Hispanics watching this is like, if I could do it, believe me, you can do it. If I can get through college, so can you. And you just got to keep moving and moving and moving, and touch base with those people that can help you, and because everyone needs a little boost here and there, and I've had them along with the bumps in the road.
Gonzalez continues to serve Arizona as U.S. Marshal, but he's starting to think about retirement, which he says will allow him to focus his attention on the communities he loves.
In its 109-year history, Arizona has had only one Latino governor. Raul Castro served Arizona from 1975 to 1977, and he wore many hats, from that of lawyer, a judge, ambassador. He died in 2015. Since then, the Hispanic voter has truly found a voice. Experts say that while Latinos make up 30% of registered voters, they often vote in smaller percentages. There was major improvement in the last 2 election cycles, and those same experts see that trend continuing.
More than a decade ago, a movement within the Latino community started in an effort to fight back against harassment and oppression. But those same efforts snowballed and are now being credited with changing the state of Arizona blue during the last presidential election. Although the movement has grown huge in size, it was partly started by a little lady in stature who was on a mission.
When someone violates a court order, there's going to be consequences.
You might not know her name, but you know her work.
We started seeing in 2004, Prop 200, and it started there. And I knew that we needed to build coalitions, and we did. And we started to build a movement.
Yes, we can! He said when!
A movement that immigration advocate Lydia Guzman would help build to push back against Arizona's law requiring proof of citizenship to vote. However, only a few years later, Guzman's coalitions became the engine behind the racial profiling case against former Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
Our community under attack, we created a hotline. And this hotline was to gather information, to see how we can help each other. But more than everything, we started gathering information and we saw a pattern.
There's no higher priority than protecting the citizens of Arizona.
But the movement would reach new heights in 2010 when Senate Bill 1070 was signed, making it a state crime to be in the country illegally, leading to these major protests.
Some say 100,000, others say 200,000. What's your estimate?
I think it was more of like 200,000 or 250,000.
250,000 people took to the streets of Phoenix in a mass protest of what was then the strictest anti-illegal immigration measure in the country.
When we marched, we had signs that said, today we march, tomorrow we vote. And the first election after that, we knew that this was just a taste of what's to come. And as the elections progressed throughout the years, we knew that the first march, we lit that fire.
10 years later, many credit that movement with changing the state of Arizona blue during the 2020 presidential election, with Latinos now making up almost 25% of voters.
It was all about community empowerment. And when you talk about community empowerment, stand up, protest, and also register to vote, community empowerment was also at the ballot box.
However, even bigger, some of the people who protested in the beginning stages of the movement are now represented in government.
What I can tell you is that when I see more folks representing us in the different boards, commissions, legislature, city councils, that's when I know that we're finally there. It's about equality.
Making what Guzman calls her labor of love worth the more than a decade of sacrifice.
There's no secret now. I lost my home, I lost my family, and I continue to move forward. At the end of the day, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think, when you look at it at the end of the day, it's worth it.
Guzman contends this movement must continue to grow and push back against some of the new voting laws that she says disproportionately target minorities. However, she is pleased to see some progress and know she played a role in changing Arizona for the better.
You're watching an Arizona's Family Special, celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month.
They're a source of pride and focal point of community gatherings for many Hispanic or Latino cultures. We're talking lowriders. Take a look at this July 4th parade in the city of Flagstaff. Among the regular floats and people celebrating our nation's birthday, you'll notice a very long line of colorful cars. They're way more than a mode of transportation. They're true works of art. And we were there as members of the worldwide Majestics Car Club put their work on display, showing love for the car culture. They had more than 10 cars in the parade and said the crowd always embraces them because they're so unique.
They just love the difference of cars that can rise and go up and down and do different stuff. It's just an attraction.
The image of lowriders has changed throughout the years. They used to be associated with gangs or crime, but today are known as a positive part of the Latino culture.
And a Scottsdale woman who served her country is now creating a TV show centered around lowriders to shine a light on some of the trials and tribulations those in the Latino community here are currently facing.
For decades, the lowrider has been a cultural statement in Mexican-American communities.
An old car, typically a classic car. The more popular ones are the Impalas. My personal favorite is a 58 Impala, which is the first year of the Impala.
For those like Didi Garcia Blaze, creating these automotive masterpieces with family represented a status symbol.
My dad, for instance, would restore classic cars because he wanted to essentially keep up with the Joneses, but couldn't afford to. So he'd go pull a car from the junkyard, restore it, make it beautiful.
Some people have never seen cars like this up here.
Call it a rolling work of art. The lowrider is customized with hydraulics, glowing colors, symbols, and trim. It's dropped within inches of the pavement and designed to cruise.
Many lowrider owners are depicted as thugs still, gangbangers, and that's just not the way it is.
Go through that one scene, 1C, take one.
Didi is an independent filmmaker out of Scottsdale, and right now she's working on a TV show aimed at shining a light on those behind these mobile art pieces.
I want people to know that the lowrider community has evolved.
After Didi served in the Air Force during the Gulf War, she became a political activist and helped launch an effort with the goal of getting Chicanos to vote through events like Cruise to the Polls, using lowriders to connect with a community that she says she's witnessed being taken advantage of.
For our people, for immigrants, people who don't have that voice, if they're getting bullied, I feel like it's our responsibility to make sure there's a level playing field and that they're treated with respect.
Through her show, she hopes to be that voice.
I do talk about the orphans and the babies in cages in this pilot. Yeah, and the car club becomes the hero, taking turns taking care of these orphans. You know, I don't think Anglos, the other population, see our pain and our hurt, and so I get to, as a director, show that. Put it in your face.
She also hopes to dispel any myths about the lowrider community.
They took a path of generosity and are extremely active with the fundraisers.
The end goal is for the show to be picked up by a network so that the world can see the good within the social and cultural dimensions of these cars.
If you have a love for lowriders or want to learn more about the cars and the culture, the Arizona Super Show happening in late March will showcase these classic and custom masterpieces at State Farm Stadium in Glendale.
You're watching an Arizona's Family Special, celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month.
That's all the time we have for today. We want to thank everyone who shared their stories with us.
On behalf of Kim Quintero and Olivia Fierro, we want to thank you for watching.
Before we go, though, we want to leave you with the sound of Valley musician Chili Lopez.